Yeah, I can't say that I'm proud of my university at all anymore. I stand with Michael Palmer on that. Now, I'm a vaccinologist. I traditionally love vaccines and develop vaccine technologies, but I do not like these current COVID-19 inoculations that we're giving to people. And you do have to understand that we have changed the definition of a vaccine during this pandemic to try and make these fit. I like to highlight a real vaccine is one that you would take for travel, for example. So a lot of people are constantly asked the question, you know, we already mandate vaccines for school children. So what's wrong with this? Well, the vaccines that we've traditionally mandated actually work. They confer what we call sterilizing or near sterilizing immunity. They actually prevent somebody from allowing the virus to propagate in their body and pass it on to others. So I like to use the example of vaccines for travel. If you go to a lot of exotic locations, often your physician will recommend that you receive a vaccine. For example, maybe you need to get vaccinated against hepatitis B. When you take these vaccines, the doctor doesn't say, you know, stay away from other people. They certainly don't say stay away from the place you're intending to travel. No, in fact, people pay lots of money to travel to the danger zone where this pathogen is actually endemic because they're confident they're protected. Those are the real vaccines. Now, I want to point out something. I'll tell you honestly, right now I feel, I guess, certainly burnt out and emotionally numb. This is really hard as a scientist to see where we're going and the fact that we're not following the science. So one of the things I just want to ask for a moment, is there anybody in the crowd here who really strongly supports the vaccine mandates and thinks these vaccines are incredibly effective and incredibly safe? Is there anybody willing to put their hand up? How about on the periphery of the crowd? Anybody on the periphery sort of hanging back and you want to see what's going on and you're really for the vaccines? Because if you are, I would invite you to come up and I'll give you 5 to 10 minutes of my time and we can engage in a respectful scientific discussion about the vaccines. Is there anybody who will do that? I don't see any hands up, but what I want to point out is I've offered that to thousands of people, thousands of naysayers, and not one person will step up and discuss the science with myself or any of my colleagues, such as Dr. Palmer and many, many others around the world. And so what I do want to point out is nobody is willing to discuss the science, all right? I was part of a group, we gave an invitation to our premier. Well, like I said, there's been thousands of people, and those who are the naysayers have to start asking, why are there a bunch of us who have stepped into the ring and nobody else? None of your champions are willing to step in the arena with us. Why? Right? As scientists, we're willing to debate the science. We keep getting attacked by people who hide behind their screens, and they're not willing to come and talk to us. They say we don't know what we're talking about. They say that we're feeding misinformation to you, the public. And if that's the case, why aren't they having these scientific discussions with us? As scientists, we're open to admitting when we're proven wrong. And if we're so wrong, why aren't they proving it? They would shut us up. They would silence us. So I'm getting very frustrated by this. And for those of you who don't know with these fact checkers, I've been fact checked to the wazoo, and I've addressed every single fact checker question that I'm aware of in various media appearances. Every single one. Just recently, Reuters, and they never tell you who's doing the fact checking, and I'll tell you, oftentimes the fact checkers are trainees, like postdoctoral fellows from other countries that are fact-checking us. It's incredible. We never know who's doing the fact-checking. But anyway, somebody recently took about a 90-second video clip of a talk that I gave at a rally like this, and they wanted to do the fact-checks. They misquoted me. I asked them to go back to the video. They'd actually misquoted me to make it seem more inflammatory, the things that I had said. But nevertheless, they wanted to know what my references were. So I sent them a very detailed email with all of the scientific references. They publish nothing. That's what happens. What they do is they wait. They usually give you 1 day to respond, which is not realistic for a busy professional, and especially one who has over 17,000 unread emails. But that's what they do. And when you don't respond, they publish their fact check and tell the public that you weren't willing to respond. And then when you do respond with all the science and they have nothing to come up with, they simply don't publish it. So I don't even bother dealing with the fact checkers anymore. Okay? Now, also, if you are a college or university student, or a parent of a college and university student, could you put up your hand, please? All right, that's great. So there's an awful lot of you here. So what I want to let you know is, because I see it as a microcosm of the larger world, I just want to give a bunch of you who aren't involved with the colleges and universities right now an idea of what's going on in these places. So, at the University of Guelph, we have more than 99% of the people vaccinated, okay? And yet everybody on campus is still required to mask, physically distance, stand on those signs on the ground. They're told which doors to enter, which doors to exit, when to enter, when to exit. There's even instructions as to how to go to the bathroom if you're sitting in the middle of a seating area. In our cafeteria, students have been criticized for taking too long to eat and putting the professors at risk of death. So they're limited in terms of how long they can be unmasked when eating. It's absolutely incredible. And the other thing that we've been finding is we have had, at the beginning, prior to the school year beginning, we had a whole bunch of students and staff who had exemptions granted. And then they were all rescinded. They were all asked to reapply. They all reapplied with the same information, and most of them were rejected the second time around. And I'm feeling awful right at the moment because on Friday there were 5 staff members whose jobs were rescued on the basis of participating in a clinical trial here in Canada. And on Friday, our university, so that these exemptions were granted, and these people who were going to be put on unpaid leave, their jobs were rescued. And on Friday, those exemptions were rejected. They were rescinded. And these people were sent home. At the end of the day, they're given 1 more week of pay and they're done. And they can't, and this is the thing, and they can't apply for EI, employment insurance. So they're literally left with 0 income in 1 week. This is what our university is doing. This is what the University of Guelph is doing. This is what they're doing to our students. And I have seen students who have had to succumb to the vaccination because they have to choose between having a mental breakdown or a physical breakdown, or getting vaccinated for their own survival, literally. Because in some cases they haven't slept for 3 days in a row. This is what's happening. This is the kind of coercion that's happening. There's no such thing as informed consent. Now, the other thing we're ignoring here in Canada, and I just want to highlight this as a piece of science, because again, it's very clear we're not following the science. The science really isn't involved anymore. But this is an example of why these vaccine mandates make 0 sense. And this is the fact that our immune systems do actually work. They do actually function. I'm an immunologist and I can tell you that our immune systems do what they're supposed to do. And there's a thing that we call naturally acquired immunity, which means historically we used to accept this idea that if you were exposed to a virus and you cleared that viral infection, you were left with immunity against that virus and were protected from it. And the reality is, it's very crystal clear now. We have a huge amount of scientific data showing that naturally acquired immunity beats the vaccine-induced immunity in every single way. Okay, so especially, I make vaccines, and these COVID-19 inoculations that are being used right now, they seem to have a duration of immunity, meaning a length of protection of somewhere in the ballpark of about 4.5 months. It is very difficult to design a vaccine to perform that poorly. Again, when people talk about the mandated vaccines that we've traditionally used, again, you get 1 vaccine as a child typically, and you don't need to be vaccinated the rest of your life. Not every 4.5 months. So it makes no sense. Natural immunity, so far, is lasting very robustly for as long as the declared pandemic has been going on, and will probably last for years. All right, so it's superior in every way. And so what that means is if you have naturally acquired immunity against the SARS coronavirus 2, you do not need the vaccine. People have, for some reason, forgotten in Canada, the goal is not to get everybody vaccinated. The goal was to get as many people as possible, a majority of us, immune to the virus. And a vaccine is just one potential way to do it. And the other thing I can tell you, based on this clinical trial that I've been participating in, is the majority of healthy adults, and we assume probably the majority of children as well, have evidence of naturally acquired immunity. In fact, the countries with the lowest vaccination status in the world are the ones that have the lowest daily COVID-19 case rates. That's just a reality, and it's almost certainly because they have had natural immunity go through their populations, right? The data is very clear. If you have naturally acquired immunity against SARS coronavirus 2, chances of you experiencing a severe side effect from the vaccine is increased relative to somebody who is naive, meaning they have no pre-existing immunity. There are multiple studies doing this now, showing this now. That's even why we see, for example, the myocarditis, there's a much higher incidence of the heart inflammation on the second dose compared to the first dose. And even then, as scientists, we went back and looked at the first dose. And we thought, okay, if pre-existing immunity makes you more susceptible to the dangers of these vaccines, although they are reduced incidence, guess what we found? When we looked at the young people who were experiencing the heart inflammation, and we also looked at another potentially fatal condition, multi-inflammatory syndrome, and when we looked at these cases that were occurring at relatively low frequency after the first dose, the majority of those kids had been previously infected with the SARS coronavirus 2, meaning they had immunity acquired against the virus. And it boils down to the way these vaccines work. Again, when these vaccines are given, they distribute widely throughout the body. There's no spike protein on them, so there's nothing that antibodies can do to stop that distribution of these lipid nanoparticles. And they seed cells throughout your body with the blueprint to manufacture the spike protein from the SARS coronavirus 2. If you have no immunity, these proteins will be expressed on your cells throughout your body, but it's going to take at least a week and up to 2 weeks before you mount any substantial antibody response. That's a week or two in which those proteins can be degraded on your cells. So once you have antibodies, there will still be some spike-expressing cells that can be destroyed. But if you have antibodies already in circulation because you've been naturally exposed to the virus, or you've had those antibodies induced after the first dose, as soon as your cells start expressing that spike protein on the surface, those antibodies are immediately going to bind to your own cells and kill them, causing a potent autoimmune reaction. This is why it's dangerous giving these vaccines to people who have antibodies against the virus in circulation. That alone is why we should not be mandating these vaccines for anybody. Instead, we should be offering voluntary testing. We should be offering tests free of charge to people to see if they have immunity. And because if you have immunity, this is the thing. If you have immunity, that's the goal. You've made it to the finish line, and there's going to be zero benefit to you and zero benefit to anybody around you to vaccinate you. But if you do get that vaccine, you are at enhanced risk of the dangers from those vaccines. This is simple medicine. Never, ever have we ever promoted giving a medical procedure to an individual when there is zero benefit to them, zero benefit to everybody around them, and only potential harm. That is never the situation in which we should be forcing these vaccine mandates. There are other vaccine technologies that are up and coming. What I will say is, in theory, they should be safer than the current batch because they all are going to have better control over the dose of the spike protein. And in theory, they shouldn't be disseminated as widely throughout the body. However, I'm never going to support any of the up-and-coming vaccines unless they complete all of the studies that are required that's been required for all traditional vaccines. Okay? So there is not one that I stand by at this point in time. Thanks for that question.